Hey students, we have another lesson for you this week. Well, not another lesson, it's actually the continuation of the lesson that we sent out on Monday. We actually don't have anything new. We actually covered all the new material that we were going to do for this week on Monday. We just wanted to give you a few more examples to make sure that you understood what it meant to factor. So let's just jump right into this, and this video should be pretty short. We only have 2 examples to walk through. So we're factoring polynomials. We're going to factor m squared plus 2m minus 24. Now, last week we told you guys to use the x game. You make an x, and here we have what we call a times c, and this is b. Now, when we talk about a, b, and c are coefficients. Okay, to put it more simple, or in simpler terms, it's the numbers that are being multiplied to the variables. The a is for the quadratic term. That's the one that you're going to see something to the power of 2. B is what we call the linear coefficient term. That one's just going to be just the variable. And then C is just a constant. It has no x attached to it. So maybe I'll just write constant. All right. So we have here factor m squared plus 2m minus 24. The very first thing you need to do is identify A, B, and C. And sometimes it works real nice for you to just write A, B, and C. So what is A, what is B, what is C? So A is the coefficient, the number being multiplied to the quadratic term. So we have our quadratic term here. How do I know? It's got the power of 2, right? So there is no number in front. So what do? Well, there is a number there. We just don't show it because it gets a little messy. And we know that when there's a 1 there, 1 times m squared is just going to give us m squared. So in this case, A is just 1. Okay, and for all these examples, A is always going to be 1. There are examples where A is not 1, but we're really not going to jump into those for algebra. You'll get those when you get to algebra 3-4. C for us here is the constant, so it's the number that's here, so it's negative 24. Notice that I took the negative with that number, and then B is going to be 2. That's this one right here, and I know B is 2 because that's the linear term, and it's the variable with no power attached to it. Well, there is a power, but the power is 1. We just leave that off. So 2. So A times C, this will be just negative 24. 1 times negative 24, and B is just 2. So here's what we're thinking. We need 2 factors that multiply to give us negative 24. So 2 numbers that multiply to give us negative 24. But when I add those 2 numbers together, it gives me 2. So let me get rid of this. And let's start thinking. What numbers multiply to give me negative 24? Well, because I got a negative, it means one of the numbers has to be negative. Not both, because if they're both negative, they both be positive. It would be positive. So let's think. Let's start off with the easiest one, 1 times 24. We could go negative 1 times 24, and we could go 24, and then we could go 1 times negative 24. In either case, we get 24, but when I add negative 1 and 24 together, let me see if I can get my mouse here, negative 1 and 24 together, that gives me positive 23, which is not what I want. 1 minus 24 would be negative 23, which is also not what I want. Remember, I want to get 2. All right, so let's jump to the next one. I think we can go 12. We can go 2 times negative 12 or negative 2 times positive 12. In either case, we get 24. However, when I add them together, right? Oh, not, I'm writing 1 times negative 24 equals negative 23. Obviously, that's not true. We're adding here. So let me get rid of these. We're adding. Obviously, 2 times negative 12 is 24. Negative 2 times positive 12 is negative 24. So in either case, we just have to check the addition. 2 plus negative 2 is negative 10, doesn't work. Negative 2 plus 12 is positive 10, also doesn't work. And I don't know if you can tell, there's a little bit of a pattern. The answer, whether this one's negative or this one's negative, is just the 23, or in this case, the opposite of 23. And here we got 10 and then negative 10. So let's see, let's keep going. What if we tried 3 and 8? And one of them's negative. Let's go negative 3, positive 3, and negative 8. Negative 3 plus 8 is going to be negative 5. And we can, positive 5. And you can already kind of tell what this is going to be. It's going to be negative 5. In either case, this doesn't work. So we have to keep going, right? And it seems like, okay, are we ever going to get there? So next one, how about 4 plus negative 6 and negative 4 plus positive 6. 4 times negative 6 is negative 24, or negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. So both those work when it comes to multiplication, but we need to add them together. 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2. Wait a minute. That is pretty close. We want a positive 2. And based off the pattern that I see here, if this one was negative 2, it must mean that this one's going to be positive 2, and it is. So this one's not it. So this is what we want. These are our two factors. So this is supposed to be negative 4 and positive 6. So what does that mean as far as factoring? And remember, factoring is turning it back into this thing, right? Where we have m and m. And then we just got to figure out these last two pieces. Well, that's what we just did. So we end up with negative 4, and we end up with positive 6. And we can always test this out to see if we did this correctly. So this you could call this your solution check. So this is our check. It's our check. We got m, negative 4, m, and positive 6. So we get m squared, negative 4m, 6m, and negative 24. So these are like terms. So I end up with m squared. 6 plus negative 4 is positive 2m minus 24. Is that what we started with? Yes. So it is correct. So factoring is just the reverse of multiplying these two factors together. It just takes a lot more work sometimes. I mean, look at all the factors we had to check, right? So let's do one more example, and then we'll call it a day. Let's say factor. And let me pull my example here. Factor. And we're going to factor x squared plus 6x plus 8. So, oops, we're not multiplying, we're factoring. X game, right? A, B, C. A is 1, B is 6, and C is 8. So A times C is 8, but we want them to add up to positive 6. So factors two numbers, and let's write this here, two numbers, that when I multiply them together, I get 8, but when I add those two numbers, I end up with 6. So we don't have to go through and check every single pair of number that multiplies to 8. I can tell you right now that 1 times 8 does give me 8, but when I add it together, it's not going to give me 6, right? So I'm not going to try 1 and 8. And so as you work with this, these problems, and you work with this factoring thing, you get a little bit better at it, and you start finding the numbers a little bit quicker, and that's great, right? So it just means you're getting a little bit better, and you're starting to see what's going on. So in this case, I can see that 4 and 2 will give me 8, and when I take 4 and I add it to 2, that'll give me 6. So those are my two factors, 4 and 2. And so this is going to factor as parentheses, parentheses, parentheses. We have the x here and the x here. We have positive 4 and positive 2. And if I wanted to check my work, just to make sure, we got x, 4, x, positive 2. And so we have now x squared, 2x, 4x, and 8. I hope I didn't go too fast for you on that. If I do, just feel free to pause and go back. Like terms, x squared plus 6x plus 8. And you are done, because that would be correct. So check. And that's it. So along with this video lesson, I'm going to send out maybe 2 more problems, 3 more problems. They're not going to be a big deal. Just we want you to continue to practice this. Next week, we're going to jump into why we use factoring. Why would we want to do this? And it really comes down to finding solutions of quadratics, which is very, very different than finding the solutions of a linear equation. So in any case, hope everybody is doing well. We hope that you're staying safe, and we'll talk to you soon.